Good afternoon, everyone. This is Desiree Sorensen Groves coming to you from the National Wildlife Refuge Association's headquarters in Washington, D.C. We are live. We are going to be talking about the 2017 Friends Assessment that we did about a year ago. Thank you all for joining us, and just want to tell you a little bit about who we are as the Refuge Association if you're the first time joining us. We are a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C., and we work to support the National Wildlife Refuge System all around the United States. We were formed in 1975 by retired refuge staff who had worked around the United States and realized there was a lot more that they could do to protect the refuge system. And to this day, we have retired Fish and Wildlife Service folks on our board and even on our staff. At the moment, our president is Jeff Haskett. He is the former regional director of the Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska. And our chief operating officer is Mark Musaeus, who is the former regional director out of the southeast region of the Fish and Wildlife Service. And we have folks on our board as well. And we also have folks from the Friends community on our board. And they help us make sure that we are connecting with the Friends community on a daily basis. This assessment that I'm going to talk about, first of all, let me give you a little logistics. I'm going to go through a set of slides and talk to you about what this was. And all through this, you'll be able to make comments or ask questions in the comment area below. You can go ahead, write the questions that you have as you think of them. I may answer them as we go through this, but in the meantime, you have it set there so you don't forget it, and we'll come back to it. I have two folks here in the office helping me. Eden Taylor, who is our communications associate, and she'll be monitoring all those questions. On Facebook, you'll see her as Harrier, named after our logo. And we also have Kristen Berry here in the office, and he has set up all these amazing things. If you could see what this looks like, you would be fairly amazed at our very high-tech system going on right here. But Kristen will be moving through the slides, and so you may hear me talk to either one of them, and you may hear them answer. I'm not sure. So this is going to be a fun thing, and let me tell you a little bit about this assessment. About a year ago, we really wanted to look at where the Friends community is around the United States. We had a pretty good sense of where Friends are, how they're working, where they have needs, where they have strengths. But this was an idea that we would send out a set of questions all around the country to Friends, and they would answer, which would give us a good snapshot of where Friends are. Even though this was about a year ago, the results, I'm sure, are about the same as they are now. And we sent this out to the boards of about 200 Friends groups, and we got responses from about 565 of you who answered this. And so that's about half of the folks that we sent it to, so it's a pretty good sampling. I'm just going to, again, go through this, and we'll see how it goes. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. So in the first slide, we're going to talk about the Friends assessment, the biggest takeaways that we saw. One of the biggest things was that about 70% of the respondents feel like their board members do not reflect the demographics of their community. That means the age, the income, gender, education, things like this. And board members don't feel that they actually reflect that. And about the same, about 20% only feel that their board reflects the diversity of the stakeholders who are using their refuge. So that could be hunters or photographers, people who are involved in environmental education. And so Friends are feeling like they don't have that representation on their board. And I guess I should back up and say, again, none of this is going to be earth-shattering, I think, but I think it's good to know as a Friends member that there are others around the United States that are feeling the same way you are and are facing the same kind of challenges. And I think this is a big one. This is probably the biggest takeaway, in my opinion. The other biggest takeaway is that across the United States, and this is going to be shocking, just shocking, the lack of resources that the Fish and Wildlife Service has to do things impacts everything that Friends do. I know there are cases where a Friends group is a powerhouse and they raise a ton of money, but the Fish and Wildlife Service, because they don't have the resources they need, they can't even take advantage of that. And that's a really tough thing. When you don't have staff on site sometimes, you don't have law enforcement officers, you don't have a visitor services person, this impacts everything that the nonprofit, you, the Friends group, tries to do. And that's, again, not earth-shattering. We know that. But again, this is what you answered from all around the country. Let's go to the next slide. Other big takeaways: about a third of Friends Group believe that their group is what's considered vibrant, defined by conserving the future. Conserving the future was a vision put together by the Fish and Wildlife Service in 2011, and it gave a kind of a strategic plan for the refuge system. And in that, it was to make Friends groups vibrant. And about a third feel that they are, about a third feel that they're not, and about a third are kind of in the middle. The majority of respondents felt that the most beneficial thing that our organization does, the National Wildlife Refuge Association, is advocacy. But again, shocking, many don't know enough about our organization to be able to answer the question. We know that. We get to know friends from around the country at different times, and then the board changes or the Fish and Wildlife Service employees change. And so we know that we need to do a better job of talking about ourselves as well as the refuge system. Let's go to the next slide. Interesting findings. This was interesting. I think a lot of friends groups feel like they have too small of a friends group and their membership is too small and they can't compete with, the big organizations that have so many. But the average membership is actually 258. I will admit that was actually higher than what I thought it would be. I think it's really great. I think it also tells us that we have some huge room to grow. Remember, this is an average. If you are in, say, a rural area in southern Missouri or Montana or Idaho, it may be impossible to try to reach that many people, but you might be able to. I think that average number of 258, we could easily double that and make it around 500 just within a few years. I think that there are things that all of us can do to try to raise awareness about the refuge system, which will in turn help friends groups raise the amount of members that they have. 42% of boards think their revenue is growing. I think maybe we probably should have asked that question a little bit more carefully. I'm concerned that boards think their revenue is growing, but they don't know. That's something that we would also want to dive a little bit deeper into. If friends groups are thinking that this is the way that it is, as a board member, why don't you know? So I think we need to dive into that a little bit. The next point I think is great. So 87% of groups that responded have a presence on social media, and almost all of those have a Facebook page. The bottom line is social media is the way that more of us communicate. That's why we're doing what we're doing, why I have KB here and Eden here, and why you guys are tuning in. This is the way that people are going to be communicating. Our president, this is the way he communicates. Like the president or not, the way that he communicates with the American people is effective, and you can't lose sight of that. So I think it's really fantastic that friends groups around the country have a social media presence. And Facebook is, I would say, the easiest way to kind of get in the door with this, but I know that we can do a lot more, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram or Pinterest, as both my husband and Eden love, and me. There are many things that we can do as a friends community to share resources through social media and really talk to each other. The next one, 90% of respondents, they said that they have a website and they have someone with sufficient skills to maintain it. And Kristen, you feel free if you want to zoom in on me as I talk about this. The thing with most friends groups and our own organization as well is that we may have the know-how. So we know how to update our website. We know how to do things. We know what the content should be, and we know the actual logistics on how to do it. But we may not have the time or the resources to get it done. And speaking from experience at our own organization, certainly I have the know-how. I don't have the know-how on how to change the website all the time. I know the content that should be changed, and I know Eden knows how to change the content on there, but we get tied up in other things, right? There could be something that needs to do a press release, or, trainings come up, and we don't get to it. It's something that we know that we have to do, though. And so all of our organizations have a responsibility to try to keep our websites as up to date as possible. It's something that we're going to be working on. We've been trying to remove content that isn't relevant or isn't up to date. But even yesterday, we had 2 Friends members come in and join us. from the Ding Darling Wildlife Society. They were up here from Florida and decided to drop in. And they had looked at our website, just to check it out and be able to talk to us about the things that we're doing. And they noticed that something on our page about the Everglades was out of date. And, we said, wait a minute, no, we definitely updated that. That couldn't be. And they showed us, and you clicked on this little link that was buried in there to a fact sheet from like 3 years ago. And we didn't even realize it was on there. So it happens. And we just have to all make a conscious effort of trying to keep as up to date as we possibly can. And we can go back to the slides, KB. About half of you feel that your website is up to date, and about a quarter feel it's mostly up to date. I would say that's kind of where our organization is as well. So next slide. Some other interesting findings. About 50% of the people who responded believe that revenue and membership are stable or growing. I think that's important. I wish it was more than 50%, but I'm happy that it is 50%, that the revenue and the membership of your organization is growing. Memberships and donations are the largest source of revenue. Again, not surprising, followed by foundation grants and what was termed just quote unquote fundraising. That's probably things coming from events, people going to a festival and paying a fee or something like that. 25% of friends also support other conservation lands. And again, KB, we can go to me for a second. I think this is an important thing. And I have to say, I was actually really excited to learn that a quarter of all friends groups support other conservation lands. The bottom line is the refuge system is not going to be successful if it doesn't partner. They can't be islands out, except for maybe Alaska, where they're huge, intact ecosystems. But refuges, by and large, are small on the landscape, and they need to partner with other communities, with other agencies, and with other public lands or private lands. And friends groups can help do that as well. In some cases, there are refuges that actually are mandated to work with the lands that are next to them, whether it be federal or state. It's part of their purpose. And so if a friends group is doing that as well, I think that makes sense. So there's a lot in that, but I think it's really powerful that a quarter of all friends around the country are actually supporting other conservation lands, because that's the only way that conservation is going to happen in our country as we go forward. Let me go back to the slide. KB, the average number of groups of events that a friends group does every year is 6. And, certainly a lot of groups do a lot more, some do a lot less, but on average about 6, which I think is probably where I thought it was. We'll go to the next slide. Now this, we're going to talk about the relationship between friends groups and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now, I know you guys are going to be shocked at this, but the overwhelming respondents said that the partnership between Friends and the Fish and Wildlife Service is strong and effective. I know, it's amazing. It's shocking that this would be the case. But in all reality, this is what makes Friends so important. This is an important piece to what we do and what Friends do. It's a family, and people that are in Friends groups know their Fish and Wildlife Service employees and know what's going on, and it makes a relationship that is honestly envied by other land management agencies. Everybody talks about the Park Service being this behemoth. Well, they are, and they have Friends groups. They don't have Friends groups the way that the refuge system does. I'll give you a little secret. A former Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar, a few years ago, likened the Fish and Wildlife Service and the refuge system to the gold standard because of the way that they partner and the way that they do things. And you guys are a part of that. So I, of course, was not shocked at all that the vast majority overwhelmingly feel that the relationship between the service and the Fish and Wildlife Service is strong and effective. And that's the power of the Friends, and that's the power of the refuge system. And it's great for me personally to be a part of that family, and I think probably all of you feel the same way. 90% of Friends feel that their programs are planned and organized with the service. I think that's a given, considering a lot of projects are occurring on the refuge, so you definitely want to make sure that the Friends are planning those events with the Fish and Wildlife Service. Many comments We had places in these questions where people could make comments, and many comments said that station leadership, so that could be the refuge manager or the project leader, that's an integral part it's a key to the success of that relationship. And I think that can't be overstated. When you must have the buy-in of the leadership at a station, so the project leader or the refuge manager. That doesn't mean that they have to be the main person dealing with the friends on a day-to-day, but it means that they have to value the friends, and that has to be a high priority. And it's very rare that it's not. I rarely, if ever, have heard that it's not for a refuge manager. The other thing that came out is that training that the Fish and Wildlife Service provides is greatly valued. And some of those are things like the Friends Academy that occurs every August out at the National Conservation Training Center in West Virginia, and friends apply to be able to go. It's amazing. Joanna Webb, the National Friends Coordinator, does this amazing job of pulling together some of the greatest expertise in the refuge system to really teach friends about what it is. If you get a chance to apply, I highly recommend that you do it. It will be worth the week that you spend out there. The mentoring program is also done by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and that provides a friends group that could be new or it could be experiencing some problems. And it provides experienced friends to go out, and sometimes Fish and Wildlife Service employees to go out and talk to those groups and kind of walk through things that are happening. Other workshops and trainings that have been occurring aren't always by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we, the Refuge Association, we also do trainings around the country in things like advocacy and capacity building, which are really important. And friends, you yourselves also are doing trainings, so peer-to-peer workshops around the country. And I think that there's some of the reasons this is so important is it's certainly the training, right? Of course, you want to know how to do fundraising, or you want to know how to grow your membership, or you want to know how to be an effective advocate. But also, it's that face-to-face time that you get with other friends who are experiencing the same thing, sometimes with the frosty beverage, sometimes not. But we get to talk about things that are occurring with your friends group and with your refuge, and you get to talk with others who are dealing with it. And again, that builds this bond within the friends community. So that face-to-face time is really, really important. Next slide. Again, talking about the relationship. About half of people who responded believe that the Fish and Wildlife Service staff that they work with really understand the roles and responsibility of their nonprofit, their friends group. This includes the legal constraints. About a third are unsure, and about 20% said that they don't feel that the service staff understand. This is a really, really important point. And Kristen, feel free to zoom in on me for this. The Fish and Wildlife Service has their own set of rules and regulations that they have to deal with. They have to do things that they are mandated by Congress to do on a refuge. But friends groups also have mandates that they have to do. If you want to be a nonprofit, you have to live by the guidelines of the Internal Revenue Service, or you lose your nonprofit status. There are things that you can and can't do. And we need to make sure that the Fish and Wildlife Service folks that you guys work with understand that and are very clear. So that they understand that you can do things that they can't do, and it's perfectly legal. And we want to make sure that all friends groups understand that as well. You can lobby, you can fundraise, you can do things that a federal employee would be fired if they did, but you can do it. And in fact, the IRS feels so strongly about this. They don't just say things like lobbying that a nonprofit can lobby. They actually say that a friends group, or not a friends group, they say that a nonprofit should lobby. That's really important, and it's something to really think about. Now, a federal employee, if they did that when they were on the dime of the federal government, they would be fired under the Hatch Act. So these are really important things to know. But you also, Fish and Wildlife Service folks need to understand that there's a lot of things that you have to do. You have a lot of state filings that you have to do. You have to adhere to certain things to make sure that you keep your nonprofit status. Another thing that folks talked about is that most people said that local service staff regularly attend the Friends board meetings. I think that's great. I think that's really, really, really important. And in fact, it's vital. It's vital for the fish and wildlife. It could be the refuge manager, it could be the project leader, it could be the liaison who is charged by the Fish and Wildlife Service leadership to be at those meetings. And that's going to be integral to making that partnership work. And here comes the part about the red flag that I mentioned earlier in a teaser about a half an hour ago. About a quarter of people who responded said that service staff regularly attend executive committee meetings. Now, executive committee is an executive function of your board. And there are times when it's appropriate for Fish and Wildlife Service folks to be in your meetings, and there are times when it's not. And that's something that you need to do. Boards, nonprofit boards, need to have time to discuss things that are important to the internal operations of your group. You need to have discussions among your boards. And it's not that you're discussing anything about the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's not that. That's not why they shouldn't be in the room. They shouldn't be in the room because you're talking about the functionality of your organization, and you need to concentrate on it. And that kind of stuff are things that you should do. Here at the Refuge Association, our board meets 3 times a year. We invite the Fish and Wildlife Service leadership to come to our board meetings because, again, the same way, friends, we need that interaction back and forth, and we need to be able to talk to Fish and Wildlife leadership both at the regional level and at the national level. But when our board goes into an executive session, folks are asked to leave. The Fish and Wildlife Service staff leaves, and our own staff leaves, unless our board asks that certain staff stay behind to answer questions. So it could be our president is asked to stay, or our chief operating officer, or me if there's something. But eventually, we're almost always asked to leave as well, because the board needs to have a discussion amongst itself. And that's something that is really important that you take away, that your board needs to have a little private time as well. Committee meetings, I think, could totally be okay for Fish and Wildlife Service to be at. And in fact, I mean, if your committee is talking about a festival or an event, then of course the service has to be there because they're an integral part about it. Interestingly enough, when you flip the question, only 10% of the people who responded said that they regularly attend service staff meetings. And again, I think that's fine. I think it's perfectly appropriate that friends are not going to every staff meeting of the Fish and Wildlife Service. They have things that they need to discuss that don't have anything to do with the Friends group. That said, I think that there's a huge value in every staff of a National Wildlife Refuge know the board members of a Friends group and vice versa, that there is a reciprocal knowledge of who people are and what they do. I remember going to the Bosque Refuge in New Mexico a couple years ago, and the entire staff and the entire board, so the staff of the refuge and the entire board came together and they met with a few of us. And I mean, at Bosque Refuge, which is a very large refuge, there was a lot of people there, but it really showed how people build relationships with one another and know who they are. I might recommend to you that if you have someone new that starts at the refuge, say a law enforcement officer or someone in visitor services or a biologist, ask the refuge manager to have a gathering of all the board members and all the staff and talk about who does what and what they do. I mean, I would think you would do this at least once a year. And that's just to build a relationship and know what everybody's roles and responsibilities are. All right, so let's go to the next one. So looking at this slide, we're going to talk about the organizational health or lack thereof. And remember, this is Friends self-assessing where you are. The first bullet, administrative documents. Almost all the groups maintain bylaws and position descriptions for officers. That's fantastic. The numbers do decline when it comes to financial policies and procedures and codes of conduct. But 50% have a manual for new board members. That's great. I mean, that's something that we as an organization are trying to come up with, a board member handbook that we would give to a new board member as soon as they come on, so that they understand their roles and responsibilities from day one, and that there's no ambiguity on what you are supposed to do as a board member. So I was really excited to hear that 50% of groups already do this, and know that there's more that more can do. About 37% of groups believe that their group is stable, and 63% said they weren't sure. I think this could be because we maybe asked the question wrong. So 37% believe their group is stable. Well, what does stable mean? Does it mean that you're stable financially? Does it mean that you're stable in your leadership, in your friends group? Does it mean that you're, on a slow trajectory to meet, goals in your strategic plan? I don't really know what stable means, and maybe folks who answered that weren't really sure what it meant either. So I think I'd like to dive into that, though. If we do this a little bit further, that's a question that I'd like to go back to friends and find out a little bit more about what that means. Another one that I thought was good was that most friends have someone on their board who is experienced with nonprofits. That's really helpful. Again, there's a lot of responsibilities that nonprofits have to do, whether it's filing your 990, going through an audit. It's really helpful to have somebody who understands this. I will say, though, again, something that Sarah, who came up here from the Ding Darling Wildlife Society yesterday, said. So she's served on a lot of different nonprofit boards through her life in different things. And coming to the Refuge and the Ding board was a whole different experience. And it took her a long time, like a couple years, to really come up to speed. She's now the vice president of the Friends Group, but it really took her a long time to come up to speed to understand all these intricacies with the relationship with the federal government. It's this whole other added layer of complication, and I mean, not in a bad way. Again, it's an amazing thing that there is this relationship, but it can be confusing. And I thought it was interesting that she said that even she, who had spent so many times on the boards of other organizations, this was still confusing, intriguing, but definitely has taken her a lot longer than she thought to get up to speed. Let's go to the next slide. Here's another one. The majority of respondents said that they do not have frequent, if ever, direct contact with friends from other organizations. I think since the time that we did this, there's been a lot of workshops where that number, I think, would probably, hopefully, go down a little bit, that most would say that they have had some sort of relationship. We used to have a lot more national workshops and regional workshops, and so we had a lot more FaceTime with each other. But and the regions and the Fish and Wildlife Service has really tried to bring that back, and peer-to-peer workshops that's been trying to bring that back. But I really think that social media can play a really vital tool here. There's a Facebook page called the Coalition of Refuge Friends and Advocates, and Eden, you can put that in our comment section so that people can see it. And these are other friends that and this is a way for people to connect with other friends from around the United States. And so, or the Fish and Wildlife Service Friends Facebook page. These are places where you can connect with other friends from around the country. And that's going to be an important way that we communicate. We can't always get together face to face, but these are places where we know that we have people who have the same interests that we do, and we can talk about things. One thing I thought that was great was nearly all organizations have a mission statement, and they use it to as the organization's focus and the foundation. That is vitally important. We want to make sure that that is the case. Sometimes friends and nonprofits need to look at their mission and make sure it still fits. It could be that 10, 20 years goes by and you really need to reevaluate it. Is this mission that we had 20 years ago when we were formed, is it still meeting the mark? In many cases it will, but in some cases it might need to be tweaked slightly, given, different dynamics going on in the environment, in the community. Less than half responded that they have a strategic plan. 25% said that they didn't know. That concerned me. I think that to be a strong and vibrant nonprofit, you need a strategic plan. You need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. You need a goal so that everybody is working toward the same thing. And when you come up with a strategic plan, as a board, you're going to go through we think we should do that, but maybe not now. You come up with an agreed strategy so that you all know where you're going. And then when things come up, you have the right to say no. You can say, no, it's not right now. It's not part of our strategic plan. We know where we're going. Or as a board, you can talk about something that comes up and really decide whether you should go after something that isn't part of your strategic plan, but might make sense. I can't say how important I think that is. I know that there's some material we have a website called Refuge Friends Connect. It is slightly outdated, not going to lie, but it has great information on it. And it's got great resources. So there are resources on there about strategic planning, about how you go about doing this. And I know that the Coalition's Facebook page also has this information. So there's a lot of resources out there. If you can't find it and you need help, just message Eden or I. You can find us very easily, and we'll pass you on that information. But it's really important that you do it if you haven't done it yet. All right, next slide. A little bit more about organizational health and lack thereof, or lack thereof. Only 15% of groups have a system for setting annual or long-term goals. That's a little disturbing. I think that I know groups do it fly by night. You know each other. The board is like 7 people. You've known each other for 15 years, and you kind of know where you're going. I still think it's good to make sure that you're sitting down with the Fish and Wildlife Service and your board, and you're setting those 1-year, 2-year, 5-year, 10-year goals on where you want to go. You got to reevaluate it all the time, just like what the Fish and Wildlife Service does with their strategic habitat management. And they manage and then they evaluate and they go in their circle. I'm making the circle because they have a circle and how they do their things. 20% of groups or folks that responded do not establish or monitor an annual budget. That's troublesome, but 80% of you do. So that's good. The vast majority, 80% of groups have an annual budget. Again, I think this is vitally important. Again, if you want to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, and how you are going to raise the money for what it is that you want to do. Maybe it's a project on the Refuge. But I really think if you want to be a vibrant friends group, this is something that is just a basic component that you need to have. About half of groups have their accounts audited or reviewed. About a quarter don't. That means probably a quarter weren't sure. This depends on your group. You may have someone who is, a tax expert who's your treasurer, and you don't feel like you need to, or you don't have enough money that it really matters. Our organization, we do an audit every year. We feel like it's vitally important to make sure that we are doing everything that we need to do, and make sure that an independent entity is looking at it. So it's really important for us. And I think there's a lot of friends groups. Obviously, half of you feel that it's important as well. About half of respondents said that their boards do not contribute more than an annual membership fee. This goes back, I think, to that how a board member comes on to the board and what their expectations are. Now, some folks, when they come onto a board, they do not have the resources to give more than an annual membership fee, right? And that's okay. Maybe they'll be giving back a lot more in-kind contributions. But I think that it's important to understand that one of the responsibilities of a board member is fiduciary, that you have this responsibility to give yourself and also to raise money. That is something that you sign up for when you become a friends or a nonprofit, a member of a nonprofit. I'm sure that's up for debate with some groups, but I think if you want to become a powerful friends group, that can do a lot of things, this is an important piece. And when you give as an individual board member, it says to foundations and others that you have skin in the game and it means something to you. Foundations often will not give grants to nonprofits that do not have 100% giving from their board. In fact, that's one of the first things that a foundation will ask. Now, granted, that annual membership fee would be enough to cover that, but it's vitally important that everyone on your board actually give to the organization. Most groups feel that they not only lack the fundraising skills, but importantly, the time necessary to be successful. Again, this is not surprising, but it's probably good to know that pretty much everyone else feels the same way too. But here we are here to help. The National Wildlife Refuge Association here in Washington, we've set up a Friends Helpline. So the number is here, and we have it on our website. You can call it anytime. The number goes directly to Eden, so Eden will answer the phone, unless it's on the weekend or at night. I mean, you call her at 3 in the morning. You people in Hawaii, she's not gonna answer at 3 in the morning. If she does, there's something wrong, and her dog's got diarrhea or something. I don't know, but we will get back to you. That was funny, wasn't it? We'll get back to you as soon as we can, like the following morning, or if it's on a weekend, we'll get back to you like on Monday morning. The idea is that you ask questions that maybe we can answer, or maybe we can find you the right person who can. Sometimes you have questions that are sensitive. You may not want to ask somebody. Maybe it has to do with financial issues. Maybe it has to do with an issue with a staff person within your organization or within the service. And these are going to be confidential. And we have people around the United States who can help confidentially figure out what is the best answer. Sometimes it could be a very simple question, like, what's the best way to use Twitter? Whatever it is, we're here to help. And we have really great people who on our board, people like Cheryl Hart, who is out at the Tualatin River National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon, or Kathy Woodward at the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. Yay! In New Jersey. And yes, every time you say Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge, yay, you have to do that, because that's what she does. And every one of you that knows Kathy knows that. And Kathy's laughing right now as I do this. But these are great people. We have people all around the United States who've been involved in the Friends community for decades, who really understand this stuff. And there are people who are out there to help and really, again, be as confidential as we need to. The next slide, I want to talk about kind of where we're looking as an organization on the future of Friends. We are looking right now, our board is undertaking an effort to update our strategic plan. And they are going to be working on it this month. And they're going to be looking at all different aspects of our organization. And a key component is going to be the Friends program. We will be looking at hiring a new Friends program director. Absolutely. And that person may have expertise in the following issues, or if they don't, they're going to be looking at finding consultants who can help. Our goal is in about, say, 5 years to have people who can really help Friends around the country with fundraising, with capacity building like membership, with communications and social media, which we have right now with Eden and Kristen, and governance. So what we want to do is come up with ways that we can help Friends grow to be the most powerful that they can be in whatever realm that means. Again, if you're in a rural area, that's going to mean something different than you're in downtown Philadelphia. Wherever you are, you have a different thing, and we want to be there to help. So we will be looking for support from Friends groups like you to help us do this, with donations from your Friends groups to us that will help fund this position. And then we're going to be looking long term from both corporations and foundations to get this going into the future. So that's kind of where we are and where we're looking. I'm kind of calling it the Friends Empowerment Plan and the Friends Empowerment Team right now, knowing that may change a little bit depending on how our strategic plan goes that our board is undertaking. So now I'm going to bring over Eden, and she has been busy typing away, answering people's questions or coming up with them. So she's going to come over and join me, and we're going to go through some of the questions that you guys have asked. But again, make sure that you are asking questions on there. She'll be looking at them. Excuse us while we kind of adjust ourselves. If you were in here, this would be funny if you could see this.
Totally.
See, it seems like it's like a really big space, but it's not. It's our little conference room, and we have like cameras and lights all around us.
Yes.
KB, can you see us both?
Eden, slide in a little bit.
Okay, Eden, slide in a little. Can you see me, KB?
You can come left, just
My left or your left?
your left 6 inches.
My left 6 inches right there.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Excellent. Okay.
Good. And Kathy did say that she was laughing. So.
Yay, Kathy. All right. So what do we got? What's some questions?
So one of the questions that was asked was by Kathy. Actually, Kathy Allen. Yeah.
Kathy Allen. Okay.
She said she just wondered who gets notifications for events like this that goes on, and does it go to all of the board members of the Friends groups, or is it just presidents? And is there a way to add multiple people to that email list that they get notifications for?
Great question. Thank you, Kathy. And we kind of wish we were down in Florida right now where you are, because it's pretty here, but it's really cold. So when we put this out, we did it out in a couple different ways. Number one, we put it on Facebook, on the Refuge Association's Facebook page. So that went to anybody who, looks at Facebook with us. That was one thing. And then...
Eden, move the mic between the two.
Oh.
Oh.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for the comment that you can't hear us.
Came from Debbie Harwood.
Thank you. Debbie Harwood is our office manager and office manager extraordinaire, jack of all trades.
Yes, jack of all trades.
Yes. So we sent it out on our Facebook page so that anybody, whether you're with a Friends group or not, that you could join. So I'm assuming we actually have a lot of folks that are not maybe members of Friends groups, but maybe now you want to be. And then we also sent it as an email to a list that we keep of friends, and that's anyone kind of in the friends community who is self-identified. So it's the people from those 200 groups that we compiled a year ago with all the boards of those. And then it's kind of anybody who we meet at a friends conference, at a friends workshop. Do we know how many people are on that list?
Ooh, it's over 1,000.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But listen, anybody, if you're involved with the friends group, please send Eden an email. She's etaylor@refugeassociation.org, and she will add you to our distribution list so that you get these things. We also put it on the Coalition of Refuge Friends and Advocates on that Facebook page. We work very closely with them, and Kathy is one of the folks that administers that page, Kathy Allen down in Florida. So, we try to put it out on as many places that we can, and hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah.
What do we got? Another one?
Yeah, and so Mike had asked, are we sure that 501c3 friends groups can lobby? That's why 501c4s are generally established. So he was kind of questioning whether or not the 501c3s can actually advocate but not lobby.
So, Mike, my favorite question, right? Of course, 501c3s can absolutely, definitely, without a question, unequivocally lobby. However, you cannot, as a 501c3, endorse a political candidate or a political party. So as we go into the election year later on this year, you, as a friends group, you cannot support a political party or a candidate. Now, there are ways that you can actually talk to both parties and both candidates as your friends group. Maybe we'll do that as another webinar closer to the election season. But you can ask people who are running for office questions. You can ask them what their positions are, and you can encourage them and ask them to support refuge system funding, to support whatever issue it is, your refuge, land acquisition, any of these things. And every 501c3 can do this. And that's where I said the IRS doesn't say just that you can, it's that you should. Now, 501c4s, these are groups who can actually get involved in political campaigns. And a lot of their funding is very different, but they can actually get into electioneering. They can get in, they can support a political candidate. Now, we don't do that as an organization. And many nonprofits, like the big environmental organizations, some of them do. But you have to separate everything. So Defenders of Wildlife does it, and they have their 501c3, and they have their action committee arm where they fundraise for political candidates. The NRA, National Rifle Association, does the same thing. They have a 501c3 arm, and then they have an arm that can actually take positions. They have to have separate everything. They have to have a separate board. They have to have their money has to be separate. But, and there's a lot of, legal constraints to that, but they can do it. We do not. We're just a plain 501c3, as are most friends groups around the country. Most friends groups are just like us. You can lobby too much. I can put a link to some information that gives you can go about 20% of your overall budget can go toward lobbying. The thing is, when you're lobbying, usually as a friends member, you're doing it on your own time and your own dollar. And so when you're doing it, you're actually not expending money to do it. We, the Refuge Association, we lobby a lot. And we've never, ever, 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 ever come close to our lobbying limit. Ever. And we're a moderate-sized organization. And so as a friends group, the chances of you coming anywhere near the limits of your lobbying ability are very slim. I would be thrilled to death if your friends group came close to your lobbying limit. What else we got?
That'd be awesome. So Cheryl actually asked, she didn't say, she actually commented that on one thing that you said, that it doesn't always have to be a formal meeting. Sometimes their board's members invites all of the service staff to a potluck lunch at the refuge. No agenda, just an opportunity to get better acquainted. So
absolutely. Actually, Cheryl, that's a great point. And again, so Cheryl Hart, who wrote this, she's a board member of ours, as well as with the Friends of Tualatin River. That's actually, I think that's a fantastic idea. A potluck where, folks are just getting together, no agenda, just getting to know each other. And I think that's an amazing idea. I think that's a great way for people to get to know each other. And then you understand, if somebody had, a couple kids a couple weeks ago and they're, frazzled because they aren't getting sleep, or, you understand a little bit more about what's going on with people's lives, which helps you also figure out how you can best help your refuge, because we're all human, and this is about, as I said, it's a family. That's what makes it, I think, very enjoyable to be part of a friends group.
Yeah.
What else do we have?
So it looks like Mike also asked, can we hire a paid lobbyist? But I think that maybe you answered that question a little bit.
But you definitely can.
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely can pay a lobbyist. Again, you're going to be how much money you're spending, and it's a portion, that 20% of your overall budget. And I mean, we, even at the Refuge Association a few years ago, even though we had people like myself and Caroline Brower here, our Director of Government Affairs, we also had a consultant that we paid for a while. He was very well connected and could get to people sometimes that we couldn't. So it's totally appropriate. Absolutely.
And that looks like it's all the questions, so... Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for your questions.
Thank
They're
you,
awesome.
everyone, for doing this. As we wrap up, I think it would be really helpful if you liked this, to let us know in the comments. Let us know what you liked about it, what you think could be better. Hey, this is the first time we've ever done this, so any suggestions would be really helpful. We plan on doing more, so what did you like about it? What topics do you think would be really helpful in doing this in the future? And, we may be able to bring in some issue experts to talk about things. And so anything that you would like to learn about in this format, let us know. We would really appreciate the feedback. So
Certainly.
From that, thank you all. Have a great week. And if we don't see you until after Earth Day, happy Earth Day to all of you as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.